everyone, and welcome to OEM Updates live interactive session on the future of automobile manufacturing. The global automotive industry is undergoing significant disruptions across the value chain. Commercial vehicles are expected to dominate the industry by 2030, and the passenger vehicles are projected to make just a 5.8% of the market by 2030. With the increasing demand and adoption of e mobility across the world, we foresee the future of Indian mobility to be clean and sustainable. The World Economic Forum has highlighted that Indian automobile industry is one of the fastest growing markets globally. Still, it makes only 0.5% in the global EV market. Mobility, when shared, connected, reliable, and electric, would be clean. And the Indian government is spurring actions to drive the adoption of clean transition and has set a target of electrifying almost 30% of the total vehicles by 2030, powered through electrifying passenger vehicles and commercial vehicles. But India still lags lower as negligence in adoption of e-mobility will remain to be a concern. So today, on this note, you're going to be a part of a live interactive session on the future of automobile manufacturing, where industry experts will elucidate on reshaping the rejuvenating trends in the automobile industry aligned with the transition towards e-mobility. They will also discuss the subsequent infrastructural investments components required to boost the automotive market in India. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor and privilege for me to introduce you to our today's esteemed panelist, Mr. Shikhar Gupta, Assistant Director, EY India, Power and Mobility, Mr. Krishna Bhojkar, Head, Manufacturing Department for Skoda Auto Volkswagen, Mr. Maxon Lewis, Managing Director at Magenta Group, and Mr. Sri Harsha, Director, Marketing for India at Dassault Systems Limited. So, delegates, get ready for a live interactive session on the future of automobile manufacturing. Beginning with the session, I would like to invite our first panelist for today's session, Mr. Shikhar Gupta, a seasoned energy and electric mobility professional with an extensive experience in new solution development, strategy, research, and insights and business developments. He is presently working as Assistant Director with EY India with over 10 years of experience in building go to market and investment strategies for clients in the areas of innovation, electric mobility, energy storage, and wider power sector. Today, in this session, he is going to discuss about the future of mobility in India with electric, connected, and commercial vehicles. So, delegates, let's welcome Mr. Shikhar Gupta.
All right. So, first of all, a very warm welcome to all of you from my side. My name is Shikhar Gupta, and I'm currently working with EY as part of their energy and mobility team. Now, before I kick in, I would like to say I'm glad to be a part of this panel because I can see almost all the necessary stakeholders and sectors being present here, whether it's the software and the services side, OEMs, and the energy mix, which I believe are the necessary stakeholders, if not all, to ensure that future of mobility takes shapes in future. Now, I would also like to share that large portion of my experience over the last 12 years has been into the energy sector. But over the last 5 or 6 years, I have been fortunate to work with a diverse set of clients, which included automotive, governments, multilaterals, oil and gas companies, utilities. And I was so positively surprised to see that every one of them are converging on one single objective, which is how we can make future of mobility more connected, electric, shared, and autonomous. And I think these are the four vectors on which I would like to spend next few minutes talking. Now, if you look at the Indian mobility themes and trends in the Indian mobility market, then it's not very different from the global disruption that is happening across. In fact, when you look at the digital and technology, when you look at the customer and demographic trends, when you look at the policy reforms and regulations which are evolving, I think even our Indian mobility market is very smoothly working on almost all the four vectors. In fact, if I quote one of the recent studies which we did around countdown clock model, which actually predicts the tipping points and inflection points for emerging technologies, then as per our research, we found that India will reach EV cost and performance parity somewhere in 2025. And now this study was done 1.5 years, and currently we are updating it. And I'm very, very confident that we'll have enough evidence to say that that tipping point date is moving forward. Now, working across regions and global deployments, I found, especially around the electrification theme, that there are some common themes which are emerging. First and foremost, there is no doubt that electric mobility will redefine the ecosystem and is setting the pace for innovation. Whether you look at the declining battery costs, whether it's the charging infrastructure, whether it's the regulations, whether it's the consumer sentiments. However, of course, if you look at the Indian market, then we are an aspirational market. At the same time, we are a cost-sensitive market. And hence, there'll be some differences in how we evolve as a market. Having said that, one of the key takeaway or lesson learned that we are seeing across global markets is collaboration. Collaboration between OEMs and utilities, between the startup companies, where the product innovation is happening, between the software and services providers. In fact, one of our key lesson learned was that almost every major company, whether it's energy or OEMs, they have set up their own VC funds, and they're funding startups, they're funding new technologies, they're part of innovation accelerators. And what it is really doing is it is creating an ecosystem where everybody can come together and share the capital risk as well as share the success. Hence, I believe that for 2021, it will be critical for Indian players to explore their partnership ecosystem and really determine how to move forward. One of the next theme that we really found was that while talking to investors, everybody believe that e-mobility is the next big thing. But still, there is some questions around across the value chain where we should invest. Now, if you look at and if you actually break down the EV value pools, a study which we have done at EY, you will find that there are several micro, macro value pools that emerge, right? From sourcing to batteries, which is a big asset in itself, to manufacturing of vehicles, to charging infrastructure, and then to the software and the services side. And the real question that investors and players are asking themselves, which are those value pools are most synergetic to me? And then which of these value pools can give me 5, 10, 15, and 20-year phenomena? And their pilots, their strategies, and their partnership systems are actually evolving around those value pools. Now, if you go to them and say, hey, can you get an ROI in the next 2 years or in the next 3 years? Perhaps the answer would be a no. But if we'll go and have a conversation, are you investing in a business model which will be sustainable in the next 10, 15, or 20 years? The answer would be a yes. And it's not just for the automotive market. If I'm talking about the energy companies, there are so many oil and gas companies who are already partnering with CPOs. They are partnering with utilities on how they can monetize their existing fuel station land for setting up EV charging infrastructure. And hence, they're identifying what are the right value pools here for them. Now, one of the other emerging topic that is really coming forward is the use of digital and technology. If you look at the future cars, then the software content in the cars is going to go up, whether it's electric or ICE. In fact, I was reading somewhere that actually an autonomous car will need to process almost gigabytes, terabytes of data in a single ride. Now, if you look at the existing component of software and ECUs, it's not very high. But again, there is a tremendous opportunity which India can capitalize on, not just for our own consumption, but actually for exports and for serving other markets as well. And hence, again, for them, they need to identify what are the right value pools. If you look at charging infrastructure, again, you look at any country, including India, one of the biggest challenge for uptake of electric mobility is charging infrastructure. And while there is no doubt that a rapid acceleration of infrastructure is necessary for the uptake of electric vehicles, whether it's your fleets, two-wheelers or three-wheelers, or even passenger cars. However, again, we did a study. While the study was for the US market, we found that almost $15 billion of investment is needed in public charging infrastructures over the next 7 to 8 years. However, again, the question is business case. Like I was just mentioning, whether you will be able to generate returns in the next 2 to 5 years, perhaps no. But as you see, similar to any new technology, I remember sitting in conferences for solar, right, 10 years back, and everybody had their doubts in terms of financing and leasing, trust in the technology. And look at now, we have passed that stage and we are growing exponentially. We believe the business case for charging infrastructure will continue to evolve. However, at current state, it will be important to identify what are your revenue levers. Can you get advertising on your charging stations? Can you use smart charging services and demand management responses backed by your charging infrastructure? Can you use neutral hosts who can actually reduce your upfront capex for land? How about public-private partnerships that can help you identify the real estate and land, which constitutes a big portion, again, for any charging infrastructure rollout? And these are some of the mechanisms of how you can actually generate positive IRRs in a tangentially lower period of time. So what we really say, and I'm just also conscious of time, Mr. Prasad, you can let me know. But what we are really aiming at is to sum all it up. There are 2 to 3 critical success factors which we believe will be necessary for the electric mobility uptake in India. First and foremost, collaboration and strong ecosystem. You need to bring startups, energy companies, OEMs, battery manufacturers, smart cities all together to take it forward. The second is public-private partnerships that will help you improve your business case tremendously. Third is standardization. Now, of course, we can debate whether in a number of countries they are technology agnostic, and actually charging infrastructure players determine which standards to use. However, this is one of the current bottlenecks. And fourth and foremost, of course, your incentives and policy support. Again, I think India has laid down an ambitious plan, but more awareness campaigns are necessary to ensure they get executed and there is enough demand in the market.
Moving ahead to our next speaker, I would like to invite Mr. Krishna Bhojkar, who has been associated with Volkswagen for the last 12 years and is presently positioned as Head Manufacturing Engineering at Volkswagen Skoda. He is responsible for precision on car assembly, engine assembly and machining, plant engineering and digitization. He is an adjunct engineering and management professional with an experience of 24 years in this industry. Today, Mr. Krishna will enlighten us on the changing technology and trends of automobile manufacturing in India. So delegates, let's welcome Mr. Krishna Bhojkar.
Good. The automotive industry, as we know, is undergoing a tremendous disruptive changes. And we have seen in recent past what all things can happen. Slowly from a car which has 4 wheels, which we talk about from mobility from point A to point B, we are starting to talk about software on wheels. That is how the whole concept has been changing. With that background, I'll just tell about what Volkswagen is all about. So Volkswagen is a group of companies. We have roughly 13 companies in the moment. 12 of them are into actual manufacturing. So you can see on the screen, we have automotive division, which manufactures passenger cars, then commercial, and then the Volkswagen Financial Services. And MOIA is a separate company, which is rendering the mobility services. So in short, we cover almost all gamut of the vehicle manufacturing as such. So starting from very small cars to big vehicles, which are produced by MAN and Scania. In addition to that, we cover the entire range from, let's say, the lower end of the cars in the spectrum of the rupee term, or we can say from there to the highest. So right up to Bugatti. So everything is been covered. This is what the Volkswagen group is all about. Then trying to give a flavor about how many manufacturing units we have. We have roughly about 122 manufacturing units worldwide. So they in total produce about 44,000 plus cars in a day. That is how the numbers we are talking about. And we have delivered already Last year's numbers will be about 1.1 plus crores. So that is the final number yet to be given out. But in that sense, you can understand that we are roughly about 250 billion plus in terms of the turnover in euro terms. And we are representing about 13 brands in 7 European countries with 6 lakhs plus people working worldwide. I'll directly jump into the topic which we are, because I think due to the shortage of time, there will be two things which I'll just give the how the automobile is changing. There are two areas which I look into. One is how the automotive industry itself is changing. On the bottom side, you can see on the quadrant that today's vehicle manufacturing concepts are typically based on the SUV, CUV, or the budget cars. This is a traditional way where we look into optimizing these cars and trying to bring in the new ways or showing the new stylings. So it's only an optimization. Recently, we already know that we went into the shared mobility services and on-demand services. Unfortunately, because of the COVID situation, this whole thing was taken in a totally different way. And everybody wanted to have their personal shared in place of the shared mobility services. So there is a change, let me say, which could be a temporary effect. Again, we may go back to original way where the shared and mobility on demand could be again coming back on the anvil. The other factor which is looking into the innovation which is there in the product, which is coming from the future concepts of autonomous or the electrified and the connected cars. This is one area which is really going to change the way we are working today. And also we are looking at how the combination of the new products as well as the business models will enhance and give us the robot or the shared taxis in a robotic way. This is how the whole industry is trying to move. In short, there could be many other things based out of this. Let I say one is electrified cars, or second, it could be also coming in from the multiple other or different engines that you can prepare on this. So these product innovations are really going to be coming really into the anvil, and we will have a huge disruption which we expect. Next, to look at if we look at only the future of vehicles in terms of electrification, with that, the next stage which we are looking at, as I explained earlier also, that we are looking at software on wheels. So that means we are trying to look at autonomous cars. So this will be completely changing the way we live in the world today. And as I said, with the shared and autonomous together, you can imagine what it can do to the automotive industry. Maybe we will have a huge reduction of the passenger cars that you see on the road. It could be because people have on-demand cars available, and then we may see a total different or a different change. That is one possibility. However, during the COVID, we have seen that it has gone into the reverse way, that people have wanted their own independent vehicles. This is also one of the things which we need to really look into. So how the worldwide trend is moving, we need to keep a tab and then keep on addressing these issues. Connected cars. So in-car connection, and the car is really connected to the world. And in between, we have also seen that car-to-car connection. So if you're moving on the road, you have a couple of cars moving on the road, all those cars also will be connected, and they'll be connected to the world. There is a big demand for this kind of things to happen, because if you are wanting to go for the autonomous cars, then this car-to-car connection as well as connection to the outside world or the environment which you are driving in also becomes very, very important. So in short, the whole ecosystem of the car will be connected. And then the electric vehicles, again, as we say, are going to be the game changer in the coming years. This has been, as we know, driven from the requirement that we need to reduce the carbon emissions, where this is the basis of all the things. There we look at the mild hybrids, plug-in, or the complete battery electric vehicles. We may also have in future something which is under proving, not yet really in the sense commercialized. That's the fuel cell or the electric cars based on the fuel cell technology. This also is one of the very good technology which we believe in future could be a game changer. We only have to wait and see how this gets into a real commercial production in terms of volumes. There are certain cars available, but not in the commercial arena at the moment. Yes, what are the basic drivers of getting into this? One is the pricing. The pricing at the moment if we look at the electric cars, they are very expensive because the most of the components which are required are coming from outside. So when I talk about Indian context, the price sensitive market, this is going to be one of the big challenge. Second, the range per kilowatt hour is something which we need to really look into, and the charging infrastructure in India. So Indian context, there we need to look into all these aspects. And as a manufacturer, we are trying to work out on multiple other areas, like looking at reduction of the weight, because battery is a huge weight. So the weight inherently goes up, and then you will have a lesser amount of range. Second topic which we are trying to look at is what could be the different type of batteries or fuel cells that you can use. That will be one very important thing. And as I think my earlier speaker, Mr. Gupta, also explained, that you have to look at the complete ecosystem for EV. It's not only just a car which is independent. As I explained earlier, the whole concept is software on cars, hence connected cars and the entire ecosystem behind needs to be very, very predominantly looked into and have that setup, because it is going to be the need of the future. And we know that it has to be done. It was earlier, as I said, chicken and egg, which comes first. So sometimes it's that you need to start off somewhere and then it will start hitting the roads. I am sure that in coming years, this will definitely happen. What is Volkswagen additionally to this trying to do? We are trying to look, as you can see on the chart, we are trying to develop a Volkswagen industrial automotive cloud. So essentially, this means that all the cars which are in the road, on the road, they will be connected to this automotive cloud, and the car is getting all the updates which are there into the system. Also, they will be connected to the entire digital ecosystem with all the technology partners. So all the support and anything that you need is going to be made possible. So these are the steps which are being taken. So with that, if I have time, then I can go to the, okay, these are the some snapshots of, let's say, the gigafactories which are being built for production of batteries. And this is going to be one of the very important things that we have seen, because suddenly if we look at 2030, Europe is going somewhere in the range of 55% of the production needs to be from the EV vehicles. And in India, we are expecting to be 30%, but we will see how it progresses. Only time will tell this. But if we need to do this, then the battery manufacturing is going to be one of the huge challenges. And ramping up that capacity, we will have to see how it comes out in the time. So with that, I think we have tried to explain what the manufacturers are doing. Obviously, there are a lot of things we expect from the government of India also. So there are a lot of subsidies, tax cuts, which are going to come up. And I think government is doing a very good job in terms of giving this boost to the industry and trying to get more and more adoption and much more faster adoption. Yes, there are certain hurdles. We will see in the course of time how they will be handled and how they will be corrected. Good.
Moving ahead to our next discussion, I would like to invite Mr. Sri Harsha. He presently holds the position of Marketing Director, India at Dassault Systems Limited. He is a graduate in mechanical engineering and is an alumni of Indian School of Business, IIM Ahmedabad, for excellence in manufacturing and operations. With an experience of more than 20 years, Mr. Sri Harsha has earned hands-on expertise on marketing, industry solutions, technology, and digital transformations. Today, Mr. Sri Harsha will talk about the transformation and democratization of automotive technologies. So delegates, let's welcome Mr. Sri Harsha.
I think my two co-panelists have set the stage with regard to giving a perspective from an analyst viewpoint in terms of how the energy ecosystem as well as the EV ecosystem would evolve and what's going to be the impact on that for a business perspective. And thanks to my fellow co-panelist, Mr. Krishna from Volkswagen, who has actually set the stage with regard to one of the world's largest OEM, is looking at how the whole ecosystem is panning out and how they are getting ready with regard to the potential new demand generation. So my topic is going to be very particular about technology. I represent Dassault Systems in India from a marketing and communication standpoint, and we are a technology company based out of Paris, very entrenched in India. We are more than 3,000 plus people, and I'm really glad to say that we're working with almost all OEMs in supply chain ecosystem in India. in hand with the strategy with regard to 3, 5-year and 10-year product development portfolio. I would not really go back and do the similar perspectives analysis with regard to how the market would evolve, but I would bring you a different perspective with regard to the technology element and how these technologies which are available for the exclusive club of the top 10 OEMs before, now it's available for even for the startups, and how it's going to change the dynamics of the industry. So the slide, what you see on the screen right now is giving you a perspective of how the interconnected ecosystems are evolving right now. Either it is from the OEMs towards the charging infrastructure, or it could be on the data side with regard to the connectivity and IoT. And for sure, shared mobility was evolving if it was not the pandemic. But again, it has an impact on the energy and the grid ecosystem as well. So if you really see progressive OEMs or startups are really looking at potential partnerships with this entire value chain as we are seeing. And what is the impact of that from a manufacturing standpoint is that given that we all are customers and we're expecting more and more personalized cars. So I think this is one slide which was really talked about by many panelists with regard to the ecosystem evolution. So what does it mean with regard to the impact is gone are the days, OEM could look in a linear fashion with regard to converting the, steel towards sheet metal from a body-in-white processes perspective and putting in place final assembly and putting together all the components, wherein the value addition of the OEM was roughly around 65% and most of the work was done by suppliers out there. Now is the time, now we need to look at impact of charging infrastructure and the ecosystem around that, the connectivity and IoT aspect of it, and with regard to the public transportation and decentralization of the energy system as well. So this really brings an element of disruptions with the way business is looked at. And the second element, which is more from an operations aspect of it, customers like you and me are expecting more customization as such, which means the design anywhere, manufacture anywhere is really happening, and made to stock, made to order is happening as well. So this brings diversity and the frequency as an additional element of a challenge while you're doing your product strategy in a much more 1, 3, 5-year planning level. And that adds to the element of technology of why digitization is needed. At a very broad level, digitization is applied in 3 levels in any automotive OEM as such. One is obviously from a product perspective. How do you evolve your product design and your processes around with making the product the most efficient, highly, in terms of regarded as a quality product to buy, and the customer is willing to really pay for the cost associated with that, along with the margins which you're looking at for the product. The second is obviously the business process of designing, manufacturing the car. And the last is not but least is the way consumer is connected with business. Are you really connecting the consumer to the part of the design process, and then also making sure that your sales, services, and post-sales is digitized as well, so that you're getting the right data sets to really improve as such. People in engineering has evolved from 2D to 3D quite a long time ago right now. Even many of the OEMs, they could be Honda or Volkswagen for that matter as well, are using 3D applications for most of their design and tooling and manufacturing work activity. But where we really see a change is the evolution from technology-centric planning in terms of looking at the business from body-in-white, fine assembly, powertrain, and chassis and steering versus, in terms of having an entirely consumer in the heart of the whole business planning as such. And this adds to the evolution of the crunching timelines with regard to coming up with new products altogether, which was originally at 5 to 6 years. Now it's coming to around less than 18 months to come out with a new product altogether. So what does that mean from an engineering impact perspective? Because amount of time you have to really validate the form, fit, and function of the car, and to really get the certification out there to sell the car from regulatory bodies like ARA and ACMA and SIAM is reduced, is very rigorous with regard to the validation. So that's where the switch towards the digital technologies like CAD, CAM, and now these days, these are all available on the cloud as well as looked at. And each physical prototype would cost roughly more than even 50 lakhs to 1 crore sometimes if it's full vehicle. And now to reduce costs, people looking at virtualization and how you can get into the virtual prototypes in validating in your product as well. And last but not least, of course, definitely production is changing. I mean, I won't really talk much about Industry 4.0 and the impact it would bring in with regard to the various set of evolutions in any plant today. But last but not least is the virtual sales. I think the pandemic has taught us that being connected to the customer, either on a website or on a phone, is very important, and educating him over the or the evolution is all the more important, so that he's walking into the showroom with much more knowledge and already with comparisons to the with your competitors as well. So having close connection to the customer is absolutely essential. So if I want to bucket it, I want to really come back with an experience that we have been seeing more and more, including MSMEs, startups looking at virtual technologies out there. And in terms of democratization, if I have to talk about, these were really available in high performance computing machines, only to be available at a very large cost to OEMs, since maybe last 5-10 years ago. But today, these are available on the cloud to many of these new players out there. And almost all global EV startups today are coming onto cloud as an adoption in coming up with their distributed model of design and development, co-development. Either one set of teams sitting in Shanghai, other sitting in California, and some teams, the styling team is sitting in Italy, and the core engineering team may be sitting in India as well. And you could see that with the way many engineering services companies in India, like the Infosys and the Wipros, are bagging projects today. And that's the reflection of how the automotive product design and development is changing as well. So virtual twin experience, as we call it as inside Dassault Systems, is going to stay. And it's not just a jargon, it's going to help people to really reduce cost and time as such.
Our vision of EV in India, do we have enough lead availability in India?
I think the whole idea right now for the EV is to move to lithium ion, not to lead. That is going to be one of the prime requirements. Lead was early topic, but not any longer. So whatever cars that you see in the market now are based on the lithium ion batteries and no longer lead. So, and for again, coming back to the same question which you asked for lithium ion, does lithium ion exist in India? The answer is no. We have to be dependent on importing the batteries either as a complete package or maybe individual components and then assemble it over here. So this is going to be one of the very huge costs, let me say. So the drivers are will be dependent on the batteries, no doubt about that. This is the situation as of now.
We are in a phase to change from mechanical vehicle to electrical vehicle. Is it possible to provide electrical brakes rather than apps or some other mechanical brakes?
The answer to this is that electrical brakes will physically not be so effective, let me say. They will be helping to reduce the speed of the car over a period of time. But if we need really good braking, it has to be the mechanical brakes, no doubt about that. So the existing braking systems will continue, and there's no doubt about that. So we use the electricity to, let's say, the EV cars are using the regenerative thing. So it will work on that, but that is not going to be like immediate stopping.
Yeah, no, I think if you look at the Indian market, then we believe that it is set for an exponential growth, especially in the two-wheelers, three-wheeler fleet segment, which is your auto rickshaws and autos, and then as well as shared mobility segments. Of course, like Mr. Krishna was mentioning, there's a lot of investments which are happening even to make EVs a viable option in the passenger cars. And I think viable is not the word, it's more aspirational. And that's why, if you see there are a lot of cars which are not even running on Indian roads, still they're most talked about. So I guess, we are expecting almost a similar kind of a growth, maybe a little bit higher in the Indian market over the next 10 years. And its pace of acceleration will vary from segment to segment, of course, where we believe, the two-wheelers and three-wheelers potentially will be the fastest growing segment.
Yeah, can you give approximate numbers in terms of the growth expected?
Well, what we are expecting is again somewhere around 20 to 25% over the next 5 to 7 years, and then an even higher number as we move beyond. Because, like I said, once the mass tipping point and acceleration reaches, then the growth becomes exponential. Till that time, the charging infrastructure rollouts and the total cost of ownerships will take their place.
And when we talk about democratization of automated technologies, how is industries reacting towards localized manufacturing and using localized technologies?
Really see with regard to the shift from China, many OEMs are looking at the value addition from suppliers actually, and that's where we really see huge increase from quite a lot of tier one suppliers in India coming up and looking at these kind of digital technologies out there. I mean, if I have to tell you, like Minda, Suprajit cables, which are right there in India, working very closely with quite a lot of OEMs out there, either in Bangalore in South or in North in in Manesar belt. They are investing in technologies out there because they believe that this is once in a lifetime opportunity for India to really grab that huge market share potentially as a shift from China. And this is not only catering to the needs of the Indian domestic OEM ecosystem, which is grappling with the supply chain disruptions, for their relying on Taiwan and China ecosystem, but also a global opportunity because many of the Western OEMs are also looking at shifting the supply chain to India. So I believe we are in the cusp of a new transformation, and we are right there serving this particular ecosystem. And we'll be happy to partner with anyone who want to really increase their value addition to the OEM ecosystem as well.
How you manage the pressures of supply chain currently?
Yeah, one of the biggest topics, as you said, is the supply chain. Since the disruption was worldwide, it needs a huge amount of change in the plans as well, because the whatever production plans you had, no doubt it had to be realigned to the availability of the components, and we had to also understand that since the group is worldwide, we still receive components out of maybe Europe or maybe from South Africa, South America, also from China. So this whole thing had to be managed. And there, the most important thing is that we have to have our flexibility in terms of the production plans. We have to understand the issues which the whole supply chain is going to face in terms of transportation, not only just the production itself, but also the transportation and what time. And the biggest thing was that our whole logistics system, as well as the production program planning guys, had to pull in a huge amount of effort to ensure that the smooth transition to a new plan was made. And literally it was like every alternate week you have to keep on changing. Some or the other things would change, but you have to react to it. And since we have done a lot of localization, that is really going to help us in the long term. In the existing cars which we are having, the localization content is a bit lesser, but then the new cars which we'll be building, our local content will be going on upwards. So there we see a big advantage to us. But as I said, the key has always been to get in touch with all the stakeholders, including the dealers also, and then try to manage it. Because this time itself was to manage, not that you could really have a plan and fix and stick to it. It was not possible.
We cannot ignore the power of, say, oil, fossil fuels still have in our economy, and how India is going to deal with that. Because presently, if you look at, it is one of the backbone of our economy.
Yeah, no, that's a very fair question. But if you also look at the kind of growth Indian renewable resources have seen over the last few years, I mean, we are almost, we might end up overachieving our target, which we have set for 2022, and we are already establishing a much higher target of almost 400 gigawatt plus by 2030. I think, we have set the stage. And the most important factor here is that there was a time when it was all being led by subsidies, incentives, and there was a push from the government. But now investors and players can see the commercial sense and business viability in this. And that's what is propelling the growth. That is number one. Second, you're absolutely right. I mean, I was in one of the debates where somebody said, if you're using coal and fossil fuels, then what's the point of having EVs on road, right? If you're just using more coal. But at the end of the day, if at a local, state, and a central level, if you're able to convert your resource into more renewables and green, then eventually, the carbon emissions savings, as well as the huge import bill that we will save, I mean, it's tremendous. Lastly, I don't think coal or gas are going to go away. You're absolutely right. They will remain the backbone. But at the same time, we have to see that there are newer technologies like carbon capture and storage which are coming. I know they are a little expensive, but there is a lot of R&D which is happening, which means that your existing coal stations doesn't have to immediately be decommissioned. You can actually retrofit them with the newer technologies. At the same time, in parallel, you keep on investing in technologies like solar and wind. So very, very positive and optimistic picture for India. I think we are moving towards a rapid place where we need our 30 to 40% of our total energy needs by renewables. And who knows other technologies like offshore wind, hydrogen, right, as they become more economically viable, that those targets will be raised even higher in the years.
How the battery recycling market will, get evolved in our country?
Absolutely. So you raised a good point. I think let me share with you two to three factors here. One, battery recycling. Okay, so before even battery recycling happens, there is a second life of batteries. I'm sure we all have read that. And the most interesting factor is there are a number of OEMs and energy companies are already undertaking collaborations. For instance, after 7 years, when let's say hypothetically the battery is no more relevant for a car, it can be used at a substation level by a discom distribution company, and that will help them reduce their maintenance and infrastructure upgrades, which means you have extended the battery life cycle. And then eventually when recycling happens, well, it's a capital intensive thing, but again, under the Make in India and strong manufacturing capability I believe India became a hub for battery recycling. Now, in some of the countries like Oceania, players are already seeing the IRRs and the business cases for recycling because you can actually harvest the raw materials, rare earth metals, and maybe potentially sell it to life sciences companies, which can use them, right? The iron, nickel, and cobalt, and several other things. So very positive, but again, we need a momentum in policy informs and ensure that it takes place in India. And again, I will just reiterate: battery. If you'll ask me, I'm a power guy, right? For me, electric vehicle is nothing but battery on wheels. and eventually, even beyond transportation, you can use it to meet your power infrastructure upgrades, V2G models. I know, right now we are at the pilot stages, but like every nascent technology, in the next 4 to 5 years, this become very, very real.
How these technologies are going to impact the bottom line for local manufacturers or OEM suppliers?
Very well thought through question. So thank you for bringing this up, actually. So if I have to give you an example, mostly like if I go back to Maruti Suzuki has more than 450 suppliers they work with. And one of the biggest things which they've been doing is localization, coming from the parts and design products coming from Japan, and localization in India as well. So when any OEM comes and asks you to develop a particular product for a certain price volume, there are two kinds of business model they expect. One is build to print primarily. So they give you the spec and they ask you to say, give me 2 lakh worth of parts, and this is the per piece cost I'm going to give as such. The second element of relationship is more partnership. If I have to give you the Bharat 6 technology, so many suppliers in tier 1 and tier 2, where OEMs are looking at a new exhaust manifold which can reduce the emissions at a certain level. It's not the forte of OEM to look at carbon emissions and what sort of catalytic converter or any other technologies can be involved to really put that product in place for the OEM as well. That's more of a partnership approach, wherein you look at the total weight of the vehicle. Is it less than 1,000 kg? And what are the key areas of the vehicle wherein you got to reduce weight as such? And what are the technologies you want to evolve as such? So this is the area wherein, if you say 2 lakh rupees is an additional cost burden for the OEM for introducing a Bharat 6 exhaust emission related technology, OEMs will come back and ask the suppliers that, can you make this whole particular component in 60,000 rupees because of the price point in India? And that's where technologies play a role, because you will have to model these technologies, test it out maybe 1,000 times to really validate and the spec provided by the OEM, and to be able to give that in the less than 14 months. And today, there's no alternative to that than virtual technologies for these kind of things. Because if you do the traditional way, you design, you go to the workshop, you cut the parts, and then you test everything. And by the time you really secure, it will be 10, 15 years or 20 years. And that's how many companies globally, either it could be Delphi or Valeo for that matter, or it could be Faurecia, suppliers have really gone up and worked hand in hand in the product development with companies like Volkswagen, BMW, and Audi. And we really see this partnership with Mahindras and the Tatas and the Maruti Suzukis will have to come in place in India using these digital technologies for them to become self-sufficient. Otherwise, they will continue to be the volume-based build-to-print approach, wherein you're just playing the price game and the volume so that you reduce the cost. And I think this is where the digital technology will play a significant role. I'm sure Mr. Krishna can add, based upon his experience, because this is exactly what they're seeing as well in terms of value addition for the product portfolio. What do you, Mr. Krishna, if you want to share a couple of comments linked to that point?
There is an occurrence about technology, that technology comes with a tag attached to it.
So I think point is very valid with regard to depending upon the product type you're making as such. So if you're actually looking at an exhaust manifold or looking at a new injection technology altogether, or looking at ADAS component as such, or coming up with a new electric vehicle motor altogether, then technology is by default needed. There's no alternative to it. Otherwise, you will have to spend maybe ages to really create that electric motor if you want to be part of the supply chain of the Teslas or the, or even for that matter for the Volkswagen. But the point again here is that where you want to really play a role in the entire value chain of a company is where that's then you apply digitization or any technology. It's not the reverse. You don't take technology first and say, I want to apply it into this particular domain, and then you look at for the ROI. And that's the mistake many of the people do in digitization as such. I believe you need to look at your entire value chain and say that where are the cost structure, criticality element, wherein digitization can save me, and then technology will play a role. I'll give one example. I'll give you an example of a very large truck OEM in India. They were actually having pan-India 6 testing centers for the trucks. I mean, I don't want to name the truck maker. And they're having paper-based applications. They're having Excel files over the test data. People who go for the field testing data, either for Himachal or for Kashmir, having that all sort of 100 Excel files, which, put together. Typically for a truck, you need to make 10,000 to 15,000 tests before you really come into a, signing check saying that the truck is feasible to really for mass production. Now imagine the amount of data 600 people in a company produce every day when they go for tests for components, subsystem level, and for a full vehicle testing. And it was chaos altogether. If somebody wants to check maybe when was the last time this particular field test was done in January, and what was the results of it, people having data all around. So what did we do is we kind of harmonized this entire test data, gave them a portal altogether, wherein if you just type the chassis number or a component number or a part number, you will see the history like you see in the Google search in regard to the part number type and who all touched, which all the functions tested that particular thing, so that the senior vehicle integration manager was much more confident in making his decisions. And you ask me, what is the cost advantage? They were having more than 300 to 500 crores spending on testing, and we were able to make a percentage reduction in that particular testing cost search. And I believe exactly the same thing applicable to even supply chain in India as well. So it's about the cost advantage or the business advantage, only then you apply tech. Otherwise, tech for the sake of tech, it's just more of a fad for many of the supply chain if they go in that particular direction.
Within digitization, we are trying to look at how we can bring all the plants together. So we have tied up with Amazon Web Services, and we want to create our own industrial cloud where all the 122 plants will be connected. And the reason for us to do that is that you can just imagine we have a plant of size of 180,000 is what we produce, and upwards is all the bigger plants which we have worldwide. So if you are able to understand each other, how the plants operate, what are the efficient ways of working, what are the measures or what are the ideas that some other plant is doing, how can you benefit from this whole information is available. The only, as what Harsha also said, is that this is not available. It is available in the piecemeal, maybe in somebody's folder somewhere, and this all immediately could be made available. So technology is going to be enabler also for us in terms of the knowledge harnessing and also making use of that knowledge. So I have knowledge available in Russia, maybe a similar plant. I can directly jump into them, see how much cars they're producing at what is, let's say, energy consumption that they have vis-a-vis what I'm doing, and what measures did they do, what are the activities they've done, what kind of technologies they adapted. All these kind of things will be much more easier. So he gave a perspective from the product development. I'm giving from the plant now. This is one of the ways. Second is there are technologies which we are trying to use and see. This is going to be a big challenge. Let's say like the additive manufacturing. This is going to be a big thing where the technology is enabling you to go and design totally different way. I mean, the parts which we earlier thought were not manufacturable could be manufactured using the additive manufacturing, and thereby you are able to reduce the cost of the product itself, one. And the only challenge which is right now we are facing is that, yes, how are you able to fit it in the cycle times, because additive manufacturing is necessarily going to take a huge time right now. Yes, there have been huge changes, let's say, in terms of the technology and how fast you can print. However, this is something which we are let's say driving and trying to see how we can embed the 3D manufacturing or the additive manufacturing on our manufacturing lines, you can imagine what will happen. The kind of logistical problems that you are able to solve. Just bring the powder and that is available on the line, print the parts just in time, just in sequence, it goes to the line. The whole concept itself will change. So this kind of challenges are there, and we are trying to see how this feasibility can be worked out for. Yes, we can restrict the additive manufacturing to certain volumes, no doubt, but maybe it is possible still. So try to make most of the technology. That's what like industry 4.0 is nothing but the same concept. You have huge amount of technologies available. There's a big menu card. Then you have to pick what is the best, which makes most sense for you, how you can bring in the business case and what works for you, and see how you can optimize. And that I think is the way ahead for all of us.
Let's also look at it. What kind of major transformations will happen in assembly line as well as supply chain while we move towards large scale EV manufacturing?
In terms of assembly, we are expecting a huge change, because earlier the kind of powertrain which you used to have, it will not exist, like the engine or the big gearboxes, and we need to bring all the things together on your lines and have the engine manufacturing online. So these things will literally vanish. So the content of work which will happen for the OE will be drastically changing. And as we said, the whole chassis could be nothing but the battery itself. So the whole battery package itself is a chassis, and then you just fit it. And this is definitely going to, let's say, reduce the content of the work, but it will put a huge load in terms of how you are getting the batteries, because that will be a huge size to transport, and a lot of care or storage need to be enhanced. So those areas where we see a huge change which is going to happen, then we need to bring in, let's say, a lot of knowledgeable people. So the skill development of the people, how to handle the batteries, what kind of issues you could like come face with during transportation, during storage, all these things we definitely need to change. And there we see, yes, as you reduce the content on your side, the content is increasing somewhere else. So the transportation cost also could be one of the major setbacks. And as you said, for the EV, yes, at this moment of time in India, we neither manufacture the power circuits, let us say, neither semiconductors, neither the battery itself, and neither the motors. So this is one huge challenge which now we need to look into to bring as a make in India. So I think that is what Atmanirbhar Bharat would be the next step which we need to focus upon. And I think that is possible. It is going to take some time, no doubt.
What are the other business opportunities you see that may emerge in the coming days?
Of course, like I said, and like Mr. Krishna also mentioned, that automotive as a sector is moving from just a product-based industry to now even more services-based industry. And I believe, that's another big area where a lot of new business models are emerging. For instance, if you look at, there are so many OEMs which are also starting to say that we are an energy management and energy and OEM company, and not just a vehicle manufacturer. So the entire conversation around is not just that I produce a vehicle. It's about I can help you with leasing, I can help you with financing, I can help you with your procurement, I can help you with your refurbishing of batteries. I can even help you with the entire software part that goes beyond and inside the car. I can help you connect to the right, how do I say, the entire retail ecosystem, right, while sitting in your car. And for all of that, it comes with additional revenue models, whether it's subscription based, whether it's pay for use, so I believe it's the services bit, and how automobile and OEM companies can go inside the customer sphere is where I see the next growth potential as well. The other is the changing business model itself. For instance, already majority of the OEMs now have leasing and subscription based car offerings, right? And it's not just you pay once and then you're gone. And I think even for electric vehicles, we need some innovative financing models to ensure that there is rapid uptake. And that's where again OEMs can partner with the financial institutions or even battery manufacturers and start selling cars without batteries. Then there's a battery operator who leases you. And you can just fill up your tank. It's like petrol and diesel. So I believe infotainment, customer services, data analytics. How can you monetize your data? data monetization, because, like I said, a car will be monetizing almost terabytes of data, which tells you about customer behaviors, your charging infrastructure behavior, at what time you're charging your car, your shopping behaviors, and all of this data, OEMs and other partners can actually start sharing and create more revenue streams. So in the next 5 to 7 years, we believe the customer service area is something that will open up significantly.
Monetization of the data, that's where I really see a huge value add, because the amount of imagination that you can have either on insurance or well-being or on additional services which a consumer would expect, you can really definitely put value add on that particular service and then club that as part of OEM service or extend with the new set of partnerships out there. Second is a very prominent visible is battery as a service. I think people are not really looking at that as a huge option, but I think that will come as if just like our cell phone subscription today, which is kind of pretty common, we will see battery as a service because government has just announced that they are okay for OEMs to sell without the battery as well. That's a trigger point for you to know that, yes, there is a potential huge opportunity as battery as a service. And potentially, standardization, I think, is really another norm, which is very essential today. And government is looking at coming up with the Bharat Battery Pack. I mean, Department of Science and Technology has really come out with this new project called as Bharat Pack, wherein people either for two-wheelers or for scooters or for cars, for a certain price point and a certain range characteristics, want to commonize and standardize either the charging cable infrastructure or the battery pack in itself and the spec. I think that's where we will see a huge amount of investments coming in as well altogether. The last but not least, multimodal transportation. I really feel today many OEMs are looking at consumers like you and me as buyers, but tomorrow it might so happen that cities might be the buyers. They might buy just like the way they're procuring buses today. They might buy EV cars and scooter and give a one ticket to me and you, basically saying that use any of these service, get me 500 rupees per month. You're free to take either a scooter to a metro station and then a metro towards, and then finally the feeder electric bus, which will take you to the office as well. This is the model which is evolving already in Singapore and many other cities, and I think it will come to India very, very soon with regard to the new collaborations, possibly with city and the various transportation authorities altogether.
Mr. Loganathan, want to know, how is Indian auto manufacturer investment on connected vehicles in terms of technology on industrial IoT? Can you address Harsha about this?
Yeah, I think it's a very valid question primarily. I won't talk about industrial IoT is a separate thing, and connected car is altogether a different domain altogether. So I would focus more on the industrial IoT. I think this is the point which even Mr. Krishna was talking about as well. So OEMs today, including suppliers, are experimenting with Industry 4.0 technologies, including industry IoT. We have started off with digitizing, with connecting with PLC and SCADA in many of our factories as one of the first steps of digitization. Basically, you're connecting your machinery with PLC so that it's operatable, sitting in one control location. That was the first step of digitization. The second step of digitization is that what are you going to do with this data? Can you connect your quality workflows, your inspection workflow, your warehouse workflow, your working process inventory and finished goods inventory workflows using digitization with a mobile app sitting in your corporate office? Can you tell which plant has today, what is the total throughput and the quality issues? And this is exactly the scenario use case Mr. Krishna was talking about, connecting 122 plants with AWS tool sets to really harness this data. I think the next step is about solving the puzzle of the logistics. And this is where we're really working very closely with some of the large OEMs, wherein he just said that because of the cyclicity of the business, the uncertainties in terms of what might go wrong, either with a truck or a train or an aeroplane with regard to the parts reaching at the right time, at the right place, onto the line at the right shop, is very, very, not deterministic, I would say. The number of things which can possibly go wrong is quite high. So having a technology applied to that, if you have a production plan in place and then you have a demand cycle in place, put together all of these puzzles and throw out the best possible sequence in order for the current days and this week's production. This is where a lot of technology is coming in today, and quite a lot of supply chain techniques is applied today, coming from the DHL and the FedEx of the world, who are really masters in managing the logistics of the world towards the automotive business. Because automotive business, if you really see, is actually assembly business. From 65% value addition, now suppliers are delivering 85% of the value chain. And I think Mr. Krishna brought out with the EV, the number of components in an automotive even will go down drastically by more than 40-50%. So what does it mean? It means it's a logistical problem to solve, and that's where is the next set of technology breakthroughs will come in terms of applying of IoT techniques for supply chain disruptions as such. I mean, Mr. Krishna can comment. He's much more credible with his day-to-day experience of seeing this problem solved in his factory as well.
So Gagan Puri and Mr. Ravichandran is also asking that what will be the role of additive manufacturing in automobile manufacturing, looking at the technology elevation or the impact of 3D printing on automobile manufacturing.
Typically, the automotive manufacturing has been moving from a steel-intensive car body to slowly we are aluminum, then FRP could be, or maybe then we'll directly go to additive manufacturing. This is again let's say thought process. So this is the wish that you'll be able to do much more on to the additive manufacturing. Maybe not the complete body, but maybe components of that. Okay, that is one thing which how the automotive OEs are thinking, because that will reduce a whole lot of logistical problems, because you just need to bring the powders inside, and then you can imagine the size or the compaction that you can have with these powders is totally different than what you want to transfer the parts. The next is the design. When you look at the designs of the cars, you can reduce a huge amount of weight, because this kind of components that you can see, which are bionic kind of designs, which can be brought into manufacturing, which were not earlier manufacturable by the classical processes which we have. So those definitely can be made possible, where the structure and function can be integrated together. So that is going to be changing a huge amount of things for us. That is one of the visions that these are again the visions. And slowly, as we see how the technology progresses, sometimes when the technologies were proposed, they were found to be ridiculous, and then they became miraculous, because it's a classic example we can take about mobile. You can sit anywhere and then be connected to the world, was never thought about. But that today is a miracle, and rather it is not even miracle. Today is like ordinary, because you know it will work and it is working. So you have accepted that as a part of your regular life. So this is what is expected. And slowly the additive manufacturing can really come onto your assembly processes or the normal processes of manufacturing, which are online. So this is what the expectation is. So this is like a vision. I won't say that this will be 100% fulfilled, but this is how OEs are trying to look, because they will solve a lot of logistical nightmares that you have. And this is one way. I hope that this additive manufacturing, where the question is explained, or let's say how we are looking into the future is explained through this.
How fast we are moving towards hydrogen as a fuel?
There's a big, let's say, kind of R&D going on onto that. To tell you frankly, I think that is still a long way to go on the hydrogen fuel cell, because inherently the safety factors which need to be considered for hydrogen fuel cell are not yet fully developed. So I think it will be some time till we really come to a place where we can say it is transportable, and in case of any eventualities like crashes or any accidents that you have, still the fuel cell can be secured and it will not be dangerous. So these, I think, are still a huge point of discussion. I don't think we have till now a point where you can say, yes, this can be commercialized.
Mr. Gulati is asking again, the storage of lithium ion battery is a real concern. How do we intend to address that?
This will be, as we go along and when we get more and more experience, I think it will be one topic which we need to take care. I mean, in the sense of the size. Yes, today the handling of lithium ion batteries is not something new. For the mobile or many of the components that we use day to day, the storage and handling is already being done. But the size that we are looking for the cars is much more bigger, and the way we need to transport. Obviously, we have been transferring a lot of hazardous items worldwide. So there will be solutions which will be found for all different kind of applications. So I don't see an issue in that sense of handling or storages at this moment of time. There are already, let's say, pre-developed kind of solutions. Let's say all the LG, or they already have Panasonic. These people have been handling. I don't know exactly what are the details of that, but they are existing. What I mean is that. 100 in 4.5 to 5 seconds is being made possible with the electric cars also, or 6 seconds. This is being made, but it will take some time to bring it down to the lower end of the cars also. Like today we are talking about, if you take sports cars or higher vehicles, those are possible at the moment, because then because the battery management and the kind of current that you draw it becomes a much more bigger topic. So this is not available, let's say, at the lower end vehicles right now, but surely maybe in future you may have it for the lower end vehicles as well.
No, so I think there are two aspects of this. One is when you look at the cost of a car, or you look at the total cost of ownership of a car. And I think that's where I was hinting in my earlier conversation, that there needs to be more awareness, more campaigns in educating consumers that if you look at an EV versus an ICE, then the maintenance and the sales and all those costs will eventually reduce significantly over a lifetime of an electric vehicle. So that is one. So look at the TCO rather than just the upfront cost. However, having said that, of course, we are a cost-sensitive market, and if I can buy a SUV for 15 lakhs, will I spend 22 lakhs on the EV version of it? I think there is a lot of R&D and investments, like Mr. Krishna, Mr. Harsha was mentioning, on the batteries, because batteries, again, one of the costliest component in any electric vehicle, and it has been declining by almost 60-70% already, right? We started what, 250 megawatt hour dollars per megawatt hour, and now it's what, 100, and maybe it's going for the views. And as it happens, I think the cost will come down. However, for right now, the uptake, I believe, again, fleets might have a more commercial and viable business case, so we are not going to see any particular challenges there. When it comes to passenger cars, awareness campaigns and TCO-driven narrative rather than an upfront cost narrative. And now with battery being separated, I think battery leasing and financing again will further, make the buying options much more convenient to the customers.
What and where are the initiatives on recycling cars, existing cars? So do we have that facility infrastructure available?
Well, I'll be honest, I'm not currently armed to answer that question, so I don't want to just give a vague answer to that, but I can definitely come back to the delegate.
So first of all, I'd like to sincerely thank Auto OEM Update, Mr. Nayak, you and Ms. Iyer, for having us be part of this particular panel. This is a very interesting topic. It is evolving. There's so many questions arising, and everyone is learning from a different perspective, from altogether, a new expert in that particular topic. So I'm thankful to Mr. Krishna as well and Mr. Gupta to share their perspectives. And if I have to make one statement, I think, I've had experiences working with Japanese and a little bit in China, working with some of the Chinese OEMs, being part of their deployments of digitization techniques. And I believe India is sitting on a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of grabbing this market share on this electric, connected, and shared mobility space. And we shouldn't be really, thinking twice in learning new things, in adopting and looking at the practices out there in Europe and West, and localizing those things for the Indian context and the Indian mindset and the Indian buyer. And time is essence. The sooner we act, the faster we'll be getting the market share with regard to the world market. And wish you the very best for 2020. Thank you.
The new technologies like the Industry 4.0 or digitization, as well as the EVs, are here to stay. So it's better we put our act together and go ahead. That is what I would say. This is the future.
No, absolutely. First of all, a big thanks to you and the panelists. I believe the question is not now if electric vehicles will pick up. It's when they become the most dominant mode of transportation. And I very strongly believe that the next 3 to 4 years will be critical, and we'll see a significant uptake of electric vehicles, not just in terms of the cars, but even the technology and the services side of it. And it will not just be the success of India in India, but it's how we can serve other global markets. So I agree. I think we are sitting on a huge opportunity.
Can we convert existing cars into EV?
Difficult, not possible. Let me say, in the existing way, you have ICE with the ICE engine in the market. To convert that, it is a Herculean task. You have to design. That's the point. So in that sense, the answer will be no.
Thank you so much, panelists, for exchanging your valuable thoughts and your views on today's topic of the future of automobile manufacturing. We hope you enjoyed this session thoroughly. Before wrapping up today's session, we would like to thank our distinguished panelists, Mr. Shikhar Gupta, Mr. Krishna Bhojkar, and Mr. Sri Harsha, for sharing their valuable thoughts and sharing so much of information on today's topic. Also, I would like to thank our editor, Mr. Prasad Nayak, for taking this initiative. With this, we would like to announce the closing of our today's session. I request you to stay tuned with us for more such sessions. Until then, thank you and goodbye.